Hey guys, we don't tend to see a lot of serious accidents around the place in our travels around Japan, usually. And as far as serious accidents being reported in the media and so on, the most common ones that we see are involve trucks on the highways. So usually what happens is the trucks are driving too close to other vehicles, and then someone makes a mistake, and then the truck will wipe out 2 or 3 other vehicles, or 4 or 5 other vehicles, and usually those accidents are fairly horrific. And that's just probably every week we see one of those on TV, on the news, or in the newspaper. There'd be at least one a week of those, and they don't seem to do much about it. There's some posters in the service areas, in the rest areas beside the highways. Sometimes you'll see a poster on the wall there warning the trucks not to travel too close to other vehicles, and that's about it. I probably have never seen a police car stop a truck in Japan. Never seen a truck pulled over by a police car in Japan. So they just don't seem to police it. You know, we made videos previously showing trucks going through red lights, and you know, the travelling too close to other cars thing. It is against the law here, but they do it. They do it. They'll ride right on your tail. We made a video about it once before, and they'll sit right on your tail, and you look in your rear vision mirror, and there they are, right on your tail. So of course, there's not much you can do about that, except make sure that you've got a long space between you and the car in front of you. So if you have to stop, you can stop gently, so you don't end up wearing one of these trucks. So that's the one we see a lot of. Another one we see a lot of is car versus pedestrian, and we actually showed you a video recently of a car versus pedestrian, and that was an older driver. And that, plus just what we've seen reported in the last couple of weeks, is what prompted this video. It seems like every day there's another story of an old person driving a car and killing a couple of pedestrians, and quite often they get charged. The one that was yesterday's one was somebody that was 70 something, and he'd been charged with manslaughter because, you know, he hadn't been paying attention, and he wiped out 2 kids walking down the street. And I'll try not to make this too depressing, because it is an incredibly depressing subject when you keep seeing it day after day. But that's often what it is. It's often kids, because of course, you know, the kids are walking to and from school and that sort of thing, so it's often kids. But we see it recently, it's been probably every day. Just about every day there's a story. There was one recently, the driver was 91 years old, and he just messed up and drove off the road. And because of course the problem is, this is a fairly wide road we're travelling on here, and they've got a little bit of a barrier between us and the pedestrian walkway there on the left. But as you've seen in previous videos, a lot of the streets that we drive on in Japan are really narrow, and there's not really any separation in a lot of those smaller streets between the cars and the pedestrians. And so that's usually what you see on the news. They report, you know, they usually show you the scene after it's been cleared, so they'll show you, you know, a sort of a powder spot on the road where they've cleaned up after the accident, and you know, the person was walking here and the cars come along and just run over them. And it's sort of not surprising. We've touched on this in other videos. Quite often what you'll see is pedestrians here will sort of wander out on the street. Cyclists are the same. They'll sort of come out on the street, or they'll cross the street without looking. And we see it all the time, and we made a video about this once before, warning people if they drive in Japan to really look out for it, because it happens all the time. You know, pedestrians and cyclists just suddenly cross the street in front of you without looking, and they'll cross at crossings without looking. They just walk straight across, or ride their bike straight across. And of course, if a driver's not paying attention or doesn't see them, there's, you know, they don't see it coming, and they just get wiped out. And we see that all the time too. So you know, it's a tragic one, that one, and we see it recently every day, just about. So obviously the solution to that one is, or the cause of that one is probably that Japanese people tend to remain active into late into their lives, you know. So 70, 80, 90-year-olds are often still riding bicycles, and they're out and about doing stuff, and they're still fairly active, which means obviously there's a lot of them that are still driving cars as well. and there's no competence testing system, no regular competence testing system for the older drivers, as there are in some countries. You know, some countries have systems where once you're over a certain age, you get tested to test your competence. All they have is, and this is typical, this is really typical, all they have is a sticker that people over 65 put on their car to show that they're an older driver, so that you can give them more distance and more sort of respect, you know, because you know it's an older driver, which again, you know, that's like the sticker that they made to show that a foreigner's driving the car. You know, it's sort of a bit of a funny solution to it, but obviously what's required, it's obvious what's required is that they need to regularly test, probably a yearly test, competence test for every driver over, you know, over retirement age in Japan, 65, so people are retired, they obviously have spare time, you know, a couple of hours a year to go to the local police station and drive the policeman around the block a few times or something like that to test their competency. Wouldn't be an unreasonable thing to legislate, and obviously make it free so it doesn't cost anything, and that would be a reasonable thing, wouldn't it? You know, that'd be a reasonable solution to it. Once a year, a couple of hours, no cost. You know, that wouldn't be an unreasonable thing to ask of a retired person. Surely they have the time, and if they want to keep their license, they've got to do that every year. Obviously that's the solution, and that would help weed out a few, of course, people who had you know, problems with driving competently. Obviously that would weed out a few of them, and that would help solve the problem, wouldn't it? So obviously that's one solution. And then as far as the truck drivers, you know, those guys just need policing. They're just really dangerous, and we've showed you videos of them doing their stuff before, and they're just shockers. You know, what you'll find when you drive on Japanese roads, one of the reasons there probably isn't a lot of other accidents on Japanese roads is Japanese people are really not, mostly are really not aggressive drivers. They're really polite and calm drivers, and you know, usually let other cars go before them, and there's very little aggression. Occasionally you'll get an aggressive dickhead, you know, but they're pretty rare. They're pretty rare. So usually there's no aggression and people letting each other in, and as a result of that, of course, everybody's being sort of calm and relaxed and non-aggressive. Obviously that means that, you know, there's not a lot of accidents. However, you know, taxi drivers tend to be a little bit aggressive, but the truck drivers are the worst. The truck drivers are by far the worst. They're super aggressive. They behave like they own the road, and are abusive. They're aggressive and abusive. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them. And if you have any experience of aggression or anything in Japan on the roads, it's likely to be from a truck driver. And this driving too close thing is just horrific. You know, the big 6-lane highways are wonderful to drive on and very safe to drive on usually, but if you end up in a group of, you know, with trucks around you, trucks behind you and in front of you and beside you, it can be really intimidating because they'll drive really close. They'll sit right on your tail, and they try and sort of push you out of the way. If you're in a fast lane, even if you're doing the speed limit, they'll come up behind you above the speed limit. They're speeding, they're above the limit, and they'll come up behind you and sit right on your tail and try and bully you out of the way so they can speed past it above the speed limit, you know. And it just seems that the police don't seem to stop them. It's sort of, there's this thing, we mentioned it on another video, there's a thing here where Japanese people tend to make excuses for if people behave badly, or if a group of people do something. Generally Japanese people will make excuses for it, and we've talked about this before with the truck drivers. We've talked to Japanese people before about the truck drivers and said, well, aren't they aggressive? You know, some of them are so aggressive, and Japanese people will say, oh, they have strict deadlines. They have strict deadlines, and that seems to be the way most Japanese people see it, is that the truck drivers, a lot of the truck drivers are super aggressive, and they speed and they go through red lights and they bully other drivers, and it's because they're on tight deadlines, and that's the end of it. They make their excuse for them, and that's the end of it. And you don't see this getting discussed on television at all, and it's amazing. It's amazing. The truck thing, they report these horrific accidents where whole families get killed, and it's sort of like typical. We've made lots of stories like this here before on videos where the same thing happens again and again and again and again, and they sort of act like they're surprised every time. Oh, this horrific thing happened on the highway. You know, this truck, somebody made a mistake and ran into someone else, and then this truck just wiped out 5 cars and all these people died, and horrific. You know, now and again it happens in a tunnel, because there's so many tunnels on the highways in Japan, and now and again it'll happen in a tunnel. Someone will make a mistake and there's nowhere to go in the tunnel. It's walls both sides, of course, so if someone makes a mistake and there's a truck in there speeding, usually he just wipes out lots of cars, you know. And every time they report it like it's something new, you know. And that's typical. It's the same, mentioned on another video about how every year they have the sports carnivals here for the kids in the middle of summer, and they have these sporting events in the middle of the day in the middle of summer, and every year a whole heap of kids will get taken to hospital with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And they report it like it's a big surprise every year. And they don't change it. They don't say, well, let's hold these events at the cooler part of the day or at a cooler time of year. They just keep doing it every year, and they get the same result, and they report it like it's news, you know. And the truck drivers, thing's the same. You know, every time there's a big horrific accident, the truck wipes out a couple of families or something, they'll report it like it's this shocking thing happened. And it's like, well, yeah, and it'll continue to happen. Obviously, they're not going to do anything about it. And you know, this week, all these reports on the internet, all these reports about all these accidents happening in Japan with the older drivers killing people, you know, and it's the same thing, you know. They reported on TV, oh, this terrible thing happened. This 92-year-old man, you know, drove his car off the road and wiped out 5 school kids walking home from school. Isn't that terrible? And that's the end of it. There's no big discussion about what can we do to fix it. And it's this inertia again that we've talked about so many times before. There's a massive inertia when it comes to changing anything here. Even when it's something that's obviously chronically, seriously bad, you know, kids getting killed and families getting killed would be about as bad as you could get, wouldn't it? You know, if a situation needs resolving, that would have to be high on the list of priorities, wouldn't it? But there's such inertia here about changing anything. You know, it's just nobody wants change. That's the underlying problem, is that nobody wants change. Everybody wants everything to stay the same way it is, and nobody wants to stand up and say, how about we do something to fix this? You know, and if they do, usually it's a table of old men sitting around talking, and usually the solutions that they come up with are just lame. You know, that they want to try and do something about the problem, but they don't want to change anything. And that's why they came up with the stickers on the cars for the old people. You know, let's put a sticker on the car for the old people so everybody knows it's an old person, right? And that's it. That's all they've done. And okay, well, let's put posters up in the service areas next to the highways and warn the truck drivers to not drive so closely to other vehicles. Well, that's not going to stop them, is it? You know, obviously it's not. Obviously it hasn't. Obviously the only way if people are breaking the law, the only way to enforce to fix the problem is to enforce the law, isn't it? Start penalising some of these guys, and then if they keep breaking the law, obviously take their licences off them and they won't be driving trucks anymore, which will be doing us all a favour. You know, the other one we showed you was these guys driving around on the phone, talking on the phone. You know, you guys saw that stroking the hoe video, and all the truck drivers driving around on the phone, and there was a big story here a while ago when Pokemon Go first came out. There was a truck driver driving his truck when playing Pokemon Go while he was driving his truck, and went straight through a pedestrian crossing and killed some people on the pedestrian crossing. That might have been kids as well. You know, playing Pokemon Go, and they gave him like 4 years in jail or something, which is just, you know, obviously that's not sending out much of a message to the other truck drivers, is it? So we still see them all. And again, the only reason he got charged was because he killed somebody. All the others that are driving around on their phones, we'd see it every day. Every day. If we left the camera on and drove around all day, we'd be able to show you lots of examples. Have a look at that video, the stroking the hoe video. That was easy. We stood in an overpass, a bit like this one above us here. Stood in an overpass with a camera for, it was like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and took that video footage of all those truck drivers on the phone driving their trucks. It was easy. easy. You know, here comes a truck, let's video this guy, is he on the phone? And a high percentage of them were. It seems like that's what they do while they're driving their truck. Rather than just driving the truck, they want to be doing something else, so they're on the phone. So yeah, I mean, this is, as with all our videos, they're just observation videos telling you what we see, and this is a terrible thing that we see. You know, one example or the other we'd see every day, and it's just tragic. It's just terrible, and it's a classic example of Japanese culture that, you know, nobody's doing anything substantial or adequate to resolve it. It'll just keep happening, it'll keep happening, and it'll keep happening. So with that in mind, you know, we mentioned this before about this sort of thing about people going through red lights here and that sort of thing, trucks and cars. And, you know, with that in mind, the advice is, red light guys, let's stop. The advice is that if you're in Japan and you're anywhere near a road at all, or a street or anything, that you just got to assume that somebody's going to do something really stupid and try and kill you. And it'll be a truck, it could be a car, you know, it could be an old person in a car, it could be a young person in a car. You know, we see some fairly not aggressive driving usually from car drivers, but fairly sort of oblivious driving, just not looking properly and going a little bit too fast down the little streets. And everyone's in a hurry here. There is a thing, this underlying Japanese culture thing about everybody's in a rush. I'm very busy. You ask people how they are, they're always busy, even when they've got absolutely nothing to do at all. They'll tell you that they're really busy, they're really busy. Everybody says that, and that's part of the driving thing, and everybody's in a big hurry. Let's all hurry. Where are you going? Grandmother's house, you know, in a big hurry. And so you just got to watch it. If you hear anywhere near where cars are, you know, this goes for car parks as well, you know, small streets, busy streets, quiet streets, you know, anywhere where there could be a car, you just have to be really, really alert, really, really careful, and just assume that somebody isn't going to look, or someone's not going to be paying attention. And you know, if you've got kids, you just got to really be careful, hold on to them and be really, really careful, because, you know, we see near misses, as well as these fatalities that we see every day. We see near misses ourselves with our own eyes every day. You know, so kids suddenly running across the street without looking, and bicyclists coming across, and the old people in their cars, but also old people on bikes are scary as hell. They just ride along the road, just come across the road, or come through an intersection without looking, and you just got to be so on the ball, you know. So you know, if you're in Japan, if you're in a car, or if you're on foot, or anything at all to do with being anywhere near roads, you just got to be so careful. Assume they're all out to kill you, because a couple of them will be for sure. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.